Hey everybody, and welcome back. In this video, I'm going to show you guys how to fix a common boo-boo. I started off making this is Kreative Kiwi's design, and it is gorgeous, and it is a scallop mug rug. And I made a mistake on it, and I figured out how to easily fix it. And it's a really good job, and it's actually pretty easy to do. Now, if you have a McDreamy machine, or if you have a machine that has a camera, it's going to be even easier. So I'm following along here with the brilliant instructions that Kreative Kiwi gives. I am doing the outline, and I put my gorgeous fabric on it and set it up. Here we go to our needle view, and I just wanted to show you guys the problem that I had. I am using different batting, and the batting that I'm using is really thick. You can see right here how thick it is. Now the machine doesn't have a hard time stitching it. I just had a hard time cutting it, and that became the problem. So going on with the instructions for this, now if you guys want a full, step-by-step instruction on this, I've done a video on it. I will put a link in the description if you want step-by-step, but I just wanted to give you guys a little guide as to what I'm doing. So I stitched it down, and that's fine. The machine, again, doesn't have any problem stitching it through. And we're going to do the middle applique part, and these are one of the things that makes Kreative Kiwi designs so awesome, is the appliques on it. Now I picked some really gorgeous fabric, and what it is, it's from a layer cake, and I got this from Cricut, believe it or not. I'd never purchased fabric from them, and it's really nice. It's the same pattern with just background colors that are different, and it really looks perfect for the scallop mug rug. So I just lay it down, and it's going to do a beautiful tack down stitch to hold it down, and then of course we're going to trim it and make sure it looks perfect. So I didn't have any problems with this trimming. It's just the fabric, so I didn't have any difficulties with that, and look at how great it's looking so far. So moving on, I take it off screen and I trim it. Now I'm starting to do, this is an addition. I did not change the Kreative Kiwi design at all. I just added to it. So I created and designed some monogram letters. This is an S and a B. And I picked the colors. I stick to the hot pink through the whole thing because I just thought it looked really nice. But these are digitized by me. I did not change the Kreative Kiwi design at all in any way. And I think it looks pretty good. I think the fabric looks pretty good. Fancy stitches in the S that's interlocking. We're going to be working more on these monograms in the weeks to come. I'm kind of obsessed with it. So this is the finishing stitch around the middle applique. Again, you can see that the zigzag stitches caught all the fabric. Kreative Kiwi designs are very forgiving. And one more time, this isn't Kreative Kiwi's design. This is my mistake. So just moving on, I cut it all out, and I didn't really notice that I had any problems because that first scallop looks fantastic. I don't see any issues with it. So I kept it going, and I didn't stop, or I didn't realize I needed to fix. But if you look at the scallop below that, you can see that the zigzag stitches did not catch the fabric. So I turned my scissors too much, and I cut the fabric too short because the batting was too thick, and I wasn't probably paying close enough attention. I was just zooming through it. So this is one thing you can look for and how to fix it. So when I go to fix it, I call it up on my computer, and I will show you guys this later, but I just wanted to make it clear that I don't change Kreative Kiwi design at all. I add to it for the fix, which makes a big difference. I personally feel that you shouldn't change any stitch files. Kreative Kiwi digitizes them specifically and tests them out, and they work. So don't change the size, don't change anything on it. Just add to it like I did here. Now, if you look at the next scallop, this is what I didn't notice at the time. The next scallop, none of it caught. So when I trimmed it, I trimmed that scallop way too short. I don't even know why I did it. I guess because, my best guess is because the batting was too thick and it was really difficult to cut. So I just kind of hacked it out. I should have grabbed bigger scissors. So I freeze frame right here, and you can see, if you're looking, if you're doing applique like this, if you're doing any designs that you have to trim and, you know, do covering stitches, so any kind of applique, if you look and you notice that the zigzag stitches don't hold the fabric, your satin stitches are not going to hold it either. And that is a problem. And there's I think there's 4 places where that happened. Not necessarily the whole scallop, but part of it. Now, I'm going to continue on with this, just finishing the satin stitches and come up with a solution afterwards. So one of the key things, one of the key steps, finish it off as best as you can and look at it and see how far out the cutting is compared to the zigzag stitches, or in this case right now, the satin stitches. And if you only have a tiny amount, here's actually a better view of it. I was pretty close, but not close enough. And again, if the zigzag stitches aren't going to hold it down, neither will your satin stitches. Now, this may be, you know, good enough to leave, but I'm really picky and I want to showcase Kreative Kiwi designs. They're perfect and I want my work to be perfect. So one of the keys is do not unhoop. If you unhoop it, all is lost. It's going to be nearly impossible to do. If you have a camera on your machine like I do, that will definitely help, but it's much easier if you leave it hooped. So if you make boo-boos, make sure you leave it hooped, and then we can work up a fix. So this finishes stitching. Let's go to the computer, and again, I'm not changing Kreative Kiwi design, I'm adding to it because I came up with an idea that will help fix it. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm using the original Kreative Kiwi design as a guide, and I'm very carefully placing a line on that inside of the last scallop. So I'm going by the satin finishing stitches, and I'm trying to be as precise as I can about this. Now, I'm in E4 right now, but you can use any software for this. It is simply a running stitch right now. The idea that I had was that I could make this into a complementary motif stitch that will just simply hold down the parts and maybe cover up the boo-boos a little bit and make sure it holds it nice so you really can't notice it. Another thing I did is that I matched the thread color to the fabric, so it's kind of a little more discreet that way. Now again, I didn't have huge boo-boos, but you know, enough for me to want to cover it up. So don't change Kreative Kiwi at all, just add a precise line around. You guys can get the hint of what we're going to do. I want the motif stitches to cover up where I made mistakes and hold it down. The other thing is you don't want it fraying or anything. So I'm just going around matching it up as carefully as I can. And I finished it. You need to do a closed object no matter what software you're doing. And then we can get playing with the motif stitches. Now, one thing, you don't want the motif stitches in thick satin to cover up the satin stitches because they're quite thick and they already have another stitch over top. So something like this doesn't really work unless you move it in and make it smaller. I want it just barely touching the satin outside stitch. So I play around a little bit and I try to come up with something that's not too big and not too little and still looks really good with the whole design. So a little bit of fiddling around. I did choose some different ones, and see, if you look, that one is covering up way too much of the satin stitches, and I didn't think it looked great with it. That one's not too bad, but it's pretty small, so I didn't like it. And, you know, you can make your design a little bit smaller. I kind of felt that a little bit of satin stitches made a little bit smaller would hold down the fabric in the two parts that came up. So play around, come up with something, you know, if it's Christmas, you can do Christmas, that sort of thing. So I decided on this one, and all I'm doing is taking the motif stitches that I made and making them fit in so they are just barely touching the satin stitches. So I'm just resizing a little bit, and you can do it because I created it manually. And once you do that and get it as perfect as you can, then delete the Kreative Kiwi design. Now we just used that for a template for it. That's all we needed it for. So once you're done and you're happy with your motif stitch, then delete all the Kreative Kiwi design parts, and look what you're left with. You're left with a perfectly sized, perfectly centered, perfectly placed stitch. So you can see I took it to my machine, and hey, that looks great, doesn't it? What I did is that I put the hoop back in. I actually didn't even take the hoop out. And I scanned it, so you can see at the top of the machine underneath the home button that there's a camera, and what it does is that it scans it and puts up a picture of it, so you can see the background, and then you can absolutely perfectly place it. Now, if you notice on this, I'm not doing any more of the Kreative Kiwi design. That is stitched. I only have my fix up part, and this is what makes it so cool. Now, if you don't have a camera to fine tune it, I know some of the machines don't, some do and some don't. I'm lucky enough to have McDreamy, and he does just about everything else. But you don't have to worry too much as long as you didn't unhoop it, because we set it up using the Kreative Kiwi as a template. And that is what makes the difference. It's already placed, it's already centered. So if you don't have a camera, you can still fix it and it will work just fine. So I want to make this one a little bit smaller. It is catching the fabric. If you look how it's placed around the scallops, it's a little bit off on some parts, but that's okay. But it touches the thick satin stitches, but it's also going to really hold down the fabric. And I stitched it out with a matching kind of thread, so it doesn't look too bad. It's not like, whoa, you added to it. It's just like, oh, that still looks really pretty. And that was the basis of it. How can I fix this without making it look terrible? Now, doesn't that look fantastic? You can see on the bottom left-hand corner there that it's not perfect, and it doesn't actually matter. It still looks good because it's not a bright color. It kind of stands out. So the moral of the story is, if you make a mistake, especially at the end like I did, I was doing the last 2 stitches, don't trash everything. Leave your stuff in the hoop and think outside the box a little bit and see if you can come up with something simple like this. It's just a motif stitch that I digitized with a running stitch and matched it up and used Kreative Kiwi as a template and added it on. And I have saved my project and I actually really like it. What it's stitching right now is that it's covering up and holding down the fabric. That was, I think, the one before it is the one. And you know what? You really can't tell that I had any issues. It just looks like, a little bit of a extra motif stitch. If you wanted, you could put one more in the middle between the large scallop part and like the pink part and the white part. Make something that'll work properly and fix your design rather than being frustrated and throwing it out. It's a quick fix and I think it worked absolutely perfectly. So that's the moral of the story. keep it in the hoop and see if you can come up with a solution. Now, I have cut things that there's no saving it. But if it's just a little boo-boo, you can save it. Look how pretty that looks. I took some close-up pictures so you can see it better. And you really, really cannot tell that I made any mistakes. It doesn't show. It keeps the edge of the fabric down. And note how I placed the motif stitch. So it's just touching in most places. It's off a little bit, but again, it doesn't matter. It's just touching the satin stitches, so you won't have any bulk issues. You won't have any problems like that. So fix it instead of tossing it out. Don't waste your fabric. Come up with something cool. Everyone try it and let me know what you think. If you make a small boo-boo, fix it. Let me know how it works out. So thanks everyone for watching. I hope you guys like this fix it video, and I hope it'll save some projects for you guys. So thanks everyone for watching. Make sure you check the links out in the description, and I'll see you guys in the next video.